Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's now 7:06 this very busy Tuesday morning. See, that's what it does to you when you get the Memorial Day, when you get any kind of Monday federal holiday. It's a Tuesday cleverly disguised as a Monday. But I can see through it. Just can't get enough. It's Tuesday morning. Thank you very much. Joining us coming up at 7:35, Peter Schweizer, who literally wrote the book on the Biden family corruption and its ties to China. There's new revelations there, and we'll discuss it. 8:05, Byron York, Washington Examiner on the Trump trial closing up this week. And then at 8:35, Mary Margaret Olahan, brand new book out today, Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult. I'm Larry O'Connor with Julie Gunlock. Good morning, Julie.
Good morning.
And speaking of the gender ideology cult, Julie and I will be appearing together in Scranton, Pennsylvania tomorrow night to kick off the Independent Women's Forum National Bus Tour featuring Riley Gaines, Martina Navratilova, Paula Scanlon, a whole bunch of advocates, Jennifer Say, advocates for keeping Title IX, protecting women instead of protecting men who are really endangering women.
Yeah, it's going to be a great event. Again, we're going to be hearing from a whole lot of female athletes who have bravely come out and spoken against the introduction of men into female sports. So it's a great event. If you're in the Pennsylvania area or Scranton area, come and join us.
Will the bus tour be swinging down into our area as well?
It will be. It will be later in the summer.
But that's not as exciting as the first day, the launch of it.
Right.
Where Julie and I will be the MCs there. We're very much looking forward to that. Joe Biden in the news as usual. He is the president of the United States, I suppose. And he gave remarks yesterday at Arlington National Cemetery to commemorate Memorial Day. And he did what he always does.
This week marks 9 years since I lost my son, Bo. Our losses are not the same. He didn't perish in the battlefield. He was a cancer victim.
Well, at least he drew that distinction this time, because usually he makes it sound like he did die on the battlefield.
Yeah.
However, why is he bringing his son Bo up at all anyway on Memorial Day? It's moronic, and I understand people saying, well, he just wants to point out that he suffered loss. Every single person on the planet Earth has had someone they know, a family member of some sort, die. That's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. Well, I know someone who died. I have a family member who died. Everybody has a family member who died. Sit down. Stop. But he brings it up because he wants to have some sort of stolen valor associated with his son.
It's the grossest kind of pandering to people who might not know the details and might then feel bad for him. He goes for that sympathy vote all the time, and it's sickening.
And by the way, if he's really going to drag his family into these official pronouncements as president of the United States, let me help him out here.
This week marks 9 years since I lost my son, Bo. Our losses are not the same. He didn't perish in the battlefield. He was a cancer victim.
And then right after he died, his widow started stooping my drug-addled son. They were in the throes of some sort of crack party, and then they went and bought a firearm after he falsified his federal record to get the firearm, and then he charged her with having to dispose of the gun, which she put apparently into a trash can right across from an elementary school. He's now facing federal charges, and she's going to be a key witness. So I talked to her Sunday night and had a little private conversation with her about it. Everything's going to be fine, though.
Yeah.
See, I'm just like you. My family is just like your family.
Good God.
There. See, I mean, if you're really going to drag your family into these things, let's have it all out.
Yeah. And honestly, it gives us the right to talk about your family. If you're going to talk about your family.
Yes,
then have at it.
Now, there's a video going around that shows President Biden waiting for his turn to speak as it appears to be a four-star general in the Air Force is giving remarks. And boy, howdy, does it look like he's dozing off. I mean, it's the whole his eyes are closed, and people can say, well, he was just being contemplative. He was praying,
Well, I watched this, and honestly, the thing that I noticed the most about this, which, yes, he does look like he's falling asleep. He's got that squinty look going, so it's hard to tell whether he's falling asleep or just squinting. But also, he cannot stop moving. twitching. He's uncomfortable. And that is another, this is one, we talked about.
Is that the Adderall?
Well, there are certain signs of cognitive decline, of Alzheimer's, of these, and that is one of them, is like not being able to sit still. Is something that's actually quite common with these diseases. And that's what I noticed, is just he's so shifty in his seat, which shows he has a level of discomfort just sitting still.
Also, by the way, you're right, all of those things. And while he was, supposed to be, paying attention to the remarks on a very solemn occasion as commander-in-chief, it looked like he was having trouble holding his head up on his shoulders. Because which is also a sign of fatigue and weakness. And that it was sort of like bobbing down. You know how your head sort of does that thing? And
I do it every morning at 4 a.m.
Yes, when you start while you're driving in, you start to doze off and your head moves like a half a centimeter, but it feels like it fell off your shoulders, right? And it like wakes you up. And it's like, wait a minute, what? It's like, your head actually didn't move that much. But that's what it looks like he's doing.
Yeah, it does.
While he's sitting there. By the way, somebody posted. So somebody in the crowd there at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier was zoomed in and made this homemade video of him, and they gave a little narration. Do we have the audio of the narration? I could give the description. Unidentified woman's voice can be heard saying, "Look, Biden's sleeping. His eyes have been closed for about 30 seconds." And then she says, "Do you think the media are going to use this?" And then she says, "He's going to drool. He's going to drool. Wake up, Biden." It was shared quite a bit all over the interwebs, as you can imagine. But that's, again, this is...
Yeah, well, look, he has a habit of this. Remember, and when the bodies of the 13 servicemen coming home from Afghanistan were unloaded, he was looking at his watch. He hates these things. He doesn't want to be there. He is sort of cajoled into going to these things. He talks about himself or his son who didn't die on the battlefield. And then he shows his complete irritation at being there by either falling asleep or twitching in his, or, moving in his chair. It's so obvious that this is a waste of his time.
Meanwhile, he and the left-wing corporate-owned media continue to repeat the completely unfounded reports. Frankly, unless it's ever confirmed by anyone, it's a lie because tons of people have come out to deny the report that Donald Trump refused to go to a military ceremony in a cemetery in Europe because he called them all losers for dying for their country. They repeat that story. Biden has himself repeated that story, even though it's completely unfounded and has never been. So here he is demonstrating to the world how much disrespect he has for the military before our very eyes, and then bringing his son's death into it.
But he also gets himself in trouble when he tries so hard to mention the story of Trump smearing American servicemen. Then he goes off script and mentions how his uncle was eaten.
That's right. Oh, you're right.
Just because
I totally forgot.
He can't control himself.
The last time he brought up the lie about Trump and losers in the cemetery, he also said, "But my uncle was eaten by cannibals in Papua New Guinea." He has this. He's such a narcissist that he always has to turn it around back to himself. And in this case, he suggested that cannibals ate his uncle. I mean, this man is such a joke. And it's kind of funny because Donald Trump, of course, had never held elected office at all, at any level, at any capacity until he became president. And, of course, it was... there were a lot of ups and downs on that roller coaster of a ride of his presidency, where he found himself in positions that were, not how we would normally view a president, whether it was public utterances or moments or whether it was things on social media.
Meanwhile,
Biden's been doing this for 50 years. And I got to tell you, when you look at the two candidates at this point, Biden makes Donald Trump look like Ronald Reagan in terms of his presidential stature.
Hey, it's Chris Plant. Find out what the media don't want you to know. Coming up this morning at 9, right here on WMAL.
The Trump trial up in Manhattan continues today with final arguments, and then this will be passed on to the jury. we're learning more about what that process is going to look like. Byron York, by the way, who's been covering this trial intently for the Washington Examiner, he's going to give us his assessment coming up at 8:05, sort of talk about the case that the prosecution needed to make and whether they made that case or whether it even matters, what with the judge giving secret jury instructions to the jury. And as we learned yesterday from Joe DeGeneva, I've served on jury duty before. Have you served on jury duty before, Julie?
I actually haven't.
Oh, wow.
I've had babies for so long.
That's
and
the best excuse.
It is. It's great. But that age, I'm aging out. So.
Well, the jury usually gets jury instructions from the trial judge. And then while you're deliberating, oftentimes when you start having discussions and you say, well, this and that, you pull out those written jury instructions and say, okay, well, how does this discussion and what we think about what happened here, how does that harmonize with the instructions the judge gave us in terms of how we're supposed to find our verdict, right? This is pretty standard fare, at least in my experience as a juror. In New York, they don't give you the written instructions. You listen to the judge, you take notes.
Oh, dear.
And then during your deliberations, you just got to have to remember what instructions the judge gave you.
Really?
Which, on a case like this, where they've kind of invented a new definition of the law.
Yeah.
Well, I shouldn't be surprised at anything that happened in this trial, I suppose. Byron York will join us at 8:05 about that. But one thing we did learn over the weekend is that, according to Politico and the New York Post, President Biden plans to address the nation from the White House when the verdict comes in, which, I don't know, sort of presupposes what he thinks is going to happen. If Trump is found not guilty, what's this address going to say? Is he going to endorse Trump? It
won't happen. It won't happen.
So they claim he's only going to do it regardless of what the verdict is, but
no,
I don't quite understand what's the point.
No, Larry, I think they know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
The fix is in. They know that it's going to be some sort of guilty, and then they wouldn't have announced this. Yeah. It could be a Hillary Clinton fireworks situation here. Okay, it could, but I think they're fairly confident, and makes me think that they probably just know. You mean
the Hillary Clinton planning the fireworks on her election? On her
could be
celebration.
A big mistake like that, putting
the shattering of the glass ceiling, that visual effect. They were going to do that at the convention center. They were at the Javits Convention Center in New York, and it has famously a glass ceiling, and they had a visual effect where it was going to shatter.
Yes, I know.
But we never got to see it.
I know. It's great.
Sorry.
Great.
Got me
so
off on a tangent.
it could be like putting the cart before the horse, being too confident, thinking that. But I just think for them to announce this.
If he's found not guilty, what's the address from? My fellow Americans, I could have sworn he was guilty. I don't know what happened here.
I know. I don't know.
We did our best. What can I tell you? Somebody's getting fired over this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Apparently, after the verdict comes in, the message is supposed to be tailored to the outcome of the trial. Either way, he intends to stress that the U.S. legal system worked and Americans should respect the process. This is a man who, along with his running mate and his entire political party, spent the entire 2020 campaign telling us that the judicial system in this country is irrevocably broken, that certain people in this country cannot get justice, and in fact, it's systemically racist and loaded against certain people in this country based on racial prejudice. So how does he know that the judicial system suddenly has been repaired in this case?
Yeah, it's a good question, Larry. I don't know.
Well, that's what the remarks are going to be. I wonder if this is going to be as serious a speech from the White House regarding the verdict here in the Trump trial in New York, if it's going to be as sobering and serious as the remarks he delivered to the American people after the death of 13 service members in Afghanistan, or the recent deaths of 2 soldiers in Iraq at the hands of...
I can't remember that speech. Did he give that speech?
Oh, surely he gave a speech to the American people.
He did not.
After the... What, no, he didn't address the nation when our fallen service members died because of his incompetence?
No.
Oh. Well, I guess you pick and choose why you deliver a speech to the American people, and, well, he's picked and chosen.
Yes.
Byron York joins us, 8:05, talk about this trial and what to expect out of Manhattan coming up.
Now.
On 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
7:36 now on O'Connor and Company. Thanks for joining us. Coming up at 8:05, we're going to have Byron York from the Washington Examiner. He'll give us an update on the Trump trial in New York, which, of course, is mislabeled by people in the corporate-owned media as a hush money trial. But it, of course, is not about hush money. There is no hush money. That's okay. The media is going to do what the media is going to do. Byron York will join us at 8:05 on that. And then at 8:35, Mary Margaret Olahan will be joining us. Brand new book out today. Her first book ever, Detrans, True Stories of Escaping the Gender Ideology Cult. Looking forward to that. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
Good morning to you, young Julie Gunlock. Joining us right now is the author of Blood Money, Why the Powerful Turn a Blind Eye While China Kills Americans. And he is also one of the most important investigative journalists in America today and a good friend, Peter Schweizer. Good morning, Mr. Schweizer. Always good to speak with you, sir.
Well, good morning, Mr. O'Connor. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, but I am disturbed by some of the news this weekend having to do with the Biden family. Where to begin?
Yeah.
We are learning that then Vice President Biden and his son Hunter Biden were in New York to attend, of all things, a memorial for the children killed in the Sandy Hook school shooting. And while there, they arranged a meeting with a Chinese oil company that ended up being about a $10 million a year boondoggle for Biden Inc. Do you know about this person named Liu Yadong and the oil company CEFC?
Yes. This is one of several companies that the Bidens were receiving money from. We know that CEFC sent at least $5 million to the Biden family, by the way, not just Hunter, according to the emails. And this came in the form of a forgivable interest-free loan. Who doesn't like getting those?
Yeah, I'd like
which was never repaid. And CEFC, as with the other companies they dealt with, Harvest, for example, all have these strong intelligence connections to the CCP. In the case of CEFC, the chairman of the company worked previously. His previous job was working for a Chinese military intelligence organization. And so it's another example of these kind of corrupt deals. And the fact that they piggybacked on this Sandy Hook event, I think is terrible, but also not terribly surprising. You find that they piggybacked on all kinds of things. You know, the famous trip Joe Biden takes as vice president on Air Force Two to China. Hunter jumps on board and secures some deals there. So they're always leveraging the positions or the authority, perceived authority that they have in office for a commercial benefit.
Yeah, and this was all revealed through text messages using an app that the Chinese communists use as well. It's called WeChat or WeText, something like that. And it should be pointed out, as President Biden has consistently said that he knew nothing about and never worked with his son, that in these messages, the meetings were set up with Jim Biden and then someone Hunter refers to as Dad. Who that might be, we'll have to figure out. Could I ask you, and also Mr. Yadong, he helped set up a charity that was used by somebody named Patrick Ho to funnel bribes to foreign officials. Mr. Ho was convicted of bribery in 2018. So that's who they're getting $10 million. Peter Schweizer, though.
And just to be clear, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Larry, but just to be clear, Patrick Ho, when he was arrested by the F on those bribery charges, according to the New York Times, his first phone call was to Hunter Biden. His first phone call, not to Chinese authorities. It was to Hunter Biden. And he paid Hunter Biden $1 million for, quote unquote, legal representation fees, even though Hunter wasn't practicing law in New York at the time.
So we know, obviously, looking at all of this, and because we have a brain that actually functions and can reach logical conclusions, that Hunter Biden and Jim Biden were making millions and millions of dollars from foreign entities, including Chinese companies linked to the Chinese communists, by selling access to their father, then Vice President Joe Biden. My question for you, Peter, is what would Jim Biden say if they were asked a simple question? What exactly did you do for this money? What was the service that you were selling? What would they say?
Well, yeah, it's funny. They don't have a good answer for that. Hunter Biden, for a $1 million payment that the CEFC Energy Company, the Chinese company, sent to the family, he described that as good faith seed money. Now, seeding what? Because we know that $1 million. That $1 million didn't go into some business account, seeding some future business. It was distributed throughout the family. So they throw up these names and these descriptions. Here's the bottom line, and I think it really comes to willful blindness. People who say, well, did Joe Biden get paid? Well, yeah, there's evidence he got a few $100,000. But people who want to say that are missing the point. In the third world, in African countries, Latin American countries, where widespread corruption takes place, the politician themselves doesn't take the money. It always goes to the family member. It's called plausible deniability. And the notion that your family can get tens of millions of dollars in an influence scheme, but as long as the politician doesn't get that much, it's okay, is patently absurd.
It is patently absurd. It's covered by our laws here. And by the way, speaking of family members getting money in exchange for God knows what, we're going to keep Peter Schweizer here for one more segment because we've got more questions about these revelations, but also about a late-night visit from the President of the United States to his daughter-in-law, the widow of his son, Beau Biden, who is set to testify this week in the criminal trial of his other son, Hunter Biden. And, well, what might have been said in that meeting, and does it amount to witness tampering? We'll get into that with Peter Schweizer in just a moment. We are grateful to Peter Schweizer for hanging out with us for a second segment here. There's plenty to discuss with regard to the grifting family known as the Bidens. We've just unpacked this latest story about apparently Joe Biden getting a meeting set up through Hunter Biden while he was visiting a memorial for the Sandy Hook kids. But that's just the tip of the iceberg here with what's going on with this family, Julie Gunlock.
Yeah. Peter, there's also breaking news that President Biden made a surprise nighttime visit to Haley Biden on Sunday. This is, just weeks before she's due to serve as one of the most important witnesses in his son's trial on gun crimes. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, it makes you wonder whether we should be changing the Hail to the Chief to the theme of The Godfather, because it certainly seems to me like intimidation. Look, she's an important witness, not the ultimate key witness, but an important witness to show that Hunter Biden was using drugs when he filled out a application for a firearm for background check and lied about it. And this is a serious crime. I mean, people go to jail for this. She would testify that, yes, he was, and that she actually disposed of the gun because she knew that he was high and he had this firearm and she thought it was unsafe. It's very reminiscent, although I would say worse than the situation a few years ago. Remember Loretta Lynch? The attorney general was investigating Hillary Clinton, and Bill Clinton happened to be at the airport and stopped by and said hello. In this particular case, Joe Biden is going directly to her. And look, the Bidens have a history of doing this, trying to jigger the law system for the benefit of the family when efforts of justice are involved. His brother Frank Biden 20 years ago ran over a single dad, tragically, and there was a civil suit in which he was found liable because the single father left two teenage girls parentless. Rather than paying the judgment, Frank Biden fled California. And there was a private investigator who looked into this that said that his brother, then Senator Joe Biden, was letting him stay at his house. And eventually Frank Biden moved to Costa Rica to avoid paying this settlement. So there's a family history there of being loyal to the family, which is fine. But when there's criminal justice system involved of basically saying we're going to play by our own rules. And this is another example of that with Joe Biden, who has always made excuses for Hunter's behaviors because, of course, they've benefited him.
These are just horrible people. We're speaking with Peter Schweizer. With regard to Hallie Biden, because the headline is Joe Biden visits daughter-in-law before testimony, but there's more to it than that. She's the widow of his son, Beau, who was the Attorney General of Delaware. As soon as he had passed away, she ran to the arms of Joe Biden's other son, Hunter Biden, they had an illicit affair. He was married at the time, by the way, Hunter was. And there's a lot of drug and substance abuse going on there. That's when this incident with the gun took place. Was Hallie Biden ever on the family payroll, such as it is? Or was she ever the beneficiary of some of this illicit money?
Yeah, she was, and specifically through Hunter. And I think you encapsulated it very well, Larry. But it is unclear to me whether Hallie ran to Hunter after her husband died or whether Hunter ran to Hallie.
Oh, thank you. That's significant, actually.
Yeah, there's some dispute there, and there's, I think, evidence that it may have been Hunter who was the one pursuing.
Wow.
But yeah, there's no question about this, and of course, Joe Biden sanctioned this, said he thought it was a beautiful thing. If you go through the Hunter Biden laptop and the text messages, you realize that this was a pretty tumultuous relationship. And let's just say that Hunter Biden did not always communicate or act as a gentleman with regard to his wife's widow. It was there were some pretty awful exchanges there. So there's no reason to believe, by the way, that Hallie would be particularly sympathetic to Hunter. I think it was a pretty severe falling out, which makes the Joe Biden visit all the more interesting and troubling.
And just to clear up one thing, Hallie Biden was paid in some fashion, but what isn't her background as a high school counselor? Or, I mean, she certainly didn't really have the background to be paid by these Chinese companies, correct? She was sort of in counseling and high school education. Isn't that right?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, and that fits the profile of people that are Biden Inc. Nobody has any expertise for anything that they're supposedly doing, and this is passing around money. I mean, that's what it is. And the thing that people also need to look at is the money flowing from China came over the course of years, more than half a decade, and the money kept coming. And yet there's no discernible service, no financial consultancy, no capital brought in. So they were clearly getting something for their money. What were they getting? Well, we know one thing they were getting, which was access to Joe Biden and favorable treatment from Joe Biden. And the money was going around to, in some cases, the grandkids received money, Hallie Biden, Joe Biden, his brother, both of his brothers, his sisters-in-law, and Joe Biden himself. It's a family affair, and none of them, as you point out, were qualified to offer anything in a business sense of legitimate value.
Family affair in every sense of the word. By the way, also last week, as we mentioned, the House Ways and Means Committee, through Chairman Jason Smith, found that Hunter Biden had lied to Congress on at least 3 occasions. We gave you all of those details. And this late-night visit on a Sunday night before Memorial Day to a key witness by the President of the United States, who, by the way, is in charge of the FBI and the Justice Department, I think can reasonably be seen as witness tampering and obstruction of justice, Peter Schweizer. We'll see if anything comes of that. But your work on these issues are always so vital, and we appreciate the sober way you go about your job. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
By the way, I've partied with Peter, and that's the only sober thing that he does in his life. Actually,
keep it quiet, Larry.
I'm just saying, he's a wild man when he's on a cruise. Thanks, Peter. Take care. 7:54.